studying The Godly Home, and I'm actually going to teach something I don't think I've ever taught before. Don't know if I've ever heard anybody teach specifically to this. They may have touched on it when they taught about these certain two individuals, but we're going to do sibling relationships. Talk about that. You know, your Bible has a lot in it about sibling relationships. And the reason this is good for the parents to know, it's to watch for the signs of things that aren't good. There's probably every case here. I'm going to show you a good relationship between siblings. I'm going to show you a bad relationship with siblings and everything in between. So turn to Genesis chapter 4. So, of course, with Genesis chapter 4, we're dealing with Cain and Abel. The first siblings on this earth, one of them raises up and kills the other. Wow. So to say teach your siblings to love one another is kind of important. It really is. Now I realize there's something different about Cain, and I wish I could explain everything about that, but it is something that the Lord just has not showed me. But let me read the text first, then go to 1 John 3:12. But I'm going to read Genesis 4, verse 8 and 9. It says, "And Cain talked with Abel his brother, and it came to pass when they were in the field that Cain rose up against Abel his brother and slew him. And the Lord said unto Cain, Where is Abel thy brother? And he said, I know not. Am I my brother's keeper? Well, yeah, in a way you are. In a way you are your brother's keeper. You're to watch out for your siblings. You're to protect them. You're to keep an eye on them. But he says, am I my brother's keeper? Now they're born at exactly or about the same time. Cain first, then Abel. So they're same age. There's no gap there. Not one older than the other, bullying the other. They're both the same as far as age goes. And there's something about Cain. Look at 1 John 3:12. Because I want to qualify this that there's more to it than just sibling rivalry. It says, not as Cain, who was of that wicked one. There has been a lot of debate about what that means. Of that wicked one because he did wicked things. I mean, anyone born after Adam is kind of that wicked one. Ye of your father the devil, okay? Now he may be saying that to them. Christ said that to the Pharisees because in his eyes they're following the devil, okay? But we're more related to the devil than we are the Lord before we're saved. So when he says, not as Cain who was of that wicked one, and slew his brother. And wherefore slew he him? Because his own works were evil and his brother's righteous. So if it's based upon what they were doing, well, he killed him for envy. And that's one of the things you're going to have to watch out for. Envy is painful discontent and resentment over the desire for the possessions or qualities of another. It's actually people who have a lot of envy. It's painful to see somebody get something they think they deserve and they don't get it. And I told you that there's a difference between envy and jealousy. Jealousy is you can be jealous over someone and even be cruel to them. Envy is you're not just because you don't possess it or you don't have it, you don't want them to have it. So it's not just cruel, it's conniving. It's plotting, okay? Look at Proverbs 27. Proverbs 27, look at verse 4. So let me tell you, there's two kinds of envy, okay? There's benign envy. You know what a benign tumor is, right? That's the ones you want, benign ones. And then there's a malignant type of envy or malicious envy, okay? Now here's a benign type of envy. I envy certain preachers because of certain qualities that they have. I'm not plotting on running them over or blowing them up, shooting them, knifing them, or trying to ruin their life because they possess it and I don't. But I do envy the fact, It's like if I had to say what I envied about some preachers, it would have to be I envy the voice of Jack Hyles. I envy the mind of Peter Ruckman. I envy the what do you call it? The zeal of Greg Estep. I envy the manliness of Joyce Myers. I mean, something like that. That's what I'm talking about. That's benign envy. Okay, if you've seen her lately, you know what I'm talking about. Anyway, those four. If I had those four, what more could I ask for? Yeah, that one ain't gonna make it. But notice he says there in Proverbs 27:4, wrath is cruel, okay, and anger is outrageous, but who can stand before envy? Someone who is envious will plot your destruction. Do you know what happened? Cain had a conversation, opened a dialogue with Abel, and then plotted to kill him. Because he waited till he was out in the field to kill him, rise up and kill him. You say, what is that? Envy. God accepted you and he didn't accept me. God accepted your works and he didn't accept mine. That's my hard labor I did there. There's no way that's right. There's something, you're just as bad as I am. You know how that goes. They think they deserve it. They think they deserve it, and because you got it and they didn't, they're going to take it away from you if they can. This is basically what envy is, what drives the world. In business, in politics, in relationships. You create somebody that's envious, you got a problem. Now, I'm not talking about that benign envy. I'm talking about that malicious envy. And if you've got a sibling that's got that, you've got troubles. And there's ways to combat that. There's ways definitely not to enable it or feed it. Sometimes, we just want to pat them on the head so much and tell them how wonderful they are that we forgot to tell them what a sinner they are. And that they're really, listen, do you really think intelligence makes you better than somebody else? Anybody? Do you really think that riches make you better than anybody else? How about talents? Because you can do more than other people, you can help more than other people. Does that make you better than them? Listen, as far as God's concerned, for all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. On that, man, the plane is level. And listen, Bible says, it's not whom man commends, whom the Lord commendeth. When the Lord says, well done, thou good and faithful servant, you've arrived. Till then, just like everybody else. No better than anybody else. I look at it this way. The only difference between a man that is a good man, that's got feelings, that cares, that is responsible, that is moral, is because somebody instilled those values in him. Because the only difference between that man and that man is the same potential, except this man got a better raising than this man. Now, they're both sinners. And this one's destructive, man. He probably needs a noose around his neck just to take him from the earth. But there he is. He's of the same seed of Adam. So it's imperative that you be able to at least identify what's going on. And sometimes we blow up the kids so much with, how wonderful they are, that we forget to tell them, how siblings treat one another. It's important. And I'll be giving you an example here, but look at Acts 7, verse 9. This is an example of malicious envy, and I'm going to tell you something, there's something else connected with envy, and that's narcissism. Okay? Now, as long as that narcissist is on top and everybody's seeing it his way, how wonderful he is, he's fine. But if he's a failing narcissist, he's coming after you. Because his envy will kick in, man. And he'll come after you. That's the way a narcissist is. He's okay as long as he's on top. But you see what happened when Cain wasn't on top. When Cain wasn't the one praised for his sacrifice on that altar, and Cain wasn't accepted of the Lord, and God didn't have any respect for his offering, you saw what happened to him. The anger took over. And then he started plotting his brother's destruction. Acts 7:9 says, and the patriarchs, moved with envy, sold Joseph into Egypt, but God was with him. Now you got all... Joseph wasn't the shy kind. I mean, when he got a dream, and he said, y'all going to do obeisance to me one day. I mean, it was true because God gave him the vision. You might want to tone it down a little bit, He was just telling them what he dreamed. They said, what, do you think we're going to bow down to you? Do you know that every one of them did, right? When they came there to Egypt, he's the second in power, and they bowed to the ground. Not worship, but in obeisance, or not in obeisance, but in obedience to someone that could say, you're dead, and that's it, they're dead. But it was true what he was saying, but he wasn't all that, I don't know, he just kind of that's it. He's not tactful about it. And it really shouldn't have mattered to them. They could have just laughed. I probably, if I'd have been his older brother, I probably would have just laughed at him. But I guess he kept saying all this. And his brothers got envious. And it says, for envy, they sold him. Now listen, they were going to kill him. They were going to kill him. And I believe the two boys, probably Simon and Levi, because we're going to find out they're vicious. Okay? Those two boys were vicious. Reuben tried to save Joseph. Well, he did save Joseph from being killed. And they threw him in the pit. And Reuben goes back later to try to get him out of the pit. He's gone. So Reuben, at least, is trying to save. He's the oldest, because he's the one that's going to be held accountable for this too. But Simeon and Levi, look in Genesis 34. Genesis 34, verse 25. It says that it came to pass on the third day when they were sore, that two of the sons of Jacob, Simon and Levi. Now, I believe these might be in order, that the second oldest is Simon, the third oldest would be Levi. Dinah's brethren took each man his sword and came upon the city boldly and slew all the males. Now, you look at the story behind it. They're dwelling in this area, and this king's son, I believe it is, takes Dinah and takes him for his wife. But the way he took her, I mean, it was typical worldly. Let's shack up first, then let's get married, that type of thing. And it made them angry, okay? But it doesn't seem like Dinah's actually against marrying him. I'm just telling you from the text, it doesn't look like it wasn't a rape, okay? So, what do you do in a case like that? Well, Jacob, I mean, he may have asked for a larger dowry. I don't know, but according to the scriptures, the man has to take her as his wife, okay? Because he's humbled her. And that would have been, but Simon Levi, as far as they saw it, he's wrought wickedness in Israel. He's turned their daughter into a harlot, and now we're going to take out our vengeance. So they get together with these individuals, should I say, and says, look, let's get together, and your people will be our people, and my people will be your people, we'll all be peoples, okay? And they say there's only one thing that you have to have the seal of circumcision. You have to be circumcised. Well, these are full-grown males. Let me tell you something, getting circumcised full-grown males, so they circumcise them. They all agree to it. And about the second or third day, when they're so sore they can't walk, these two fall on every man in that city and kill them. And Jacob is just horrified of what they've done. Jacob raised them. And these two were vicious. Now, Genesis 35:22. You can kind of watch for that. Watch how children treat small animals or something they can have control of. Now, honestly, when they first begin, you got to teach them to be gentle, soft, and even when the animal can lash out a little bit, you got to let them know. The animal doesn't know. You do, okay? If they're violent to an animal, that'll grow into something else. I think that's where Jeffrey Dahmer started. Started with animals. Next thing you know, he's eating people. Genesis 35:22, and it came to pass, and here's another situation, when Israel dwelt in that land, that Reuben went and lay with Bilhah, his father's concubine, and Israel heard it. Now the sons of Jacob were 12. Here's a situation where the oldest, I'm a man now. So what does he do? He doesn't go out and get his own woman. He takes one of his father's handmaids or concubines. So, and you got to understand, this eliminated, as we go down through here, and I wish I could lay out every last one of them, but every last one of them gets denied the line of Christ because of some of these actions. Now, Judah does, I think he does like two different things, but both occasions Judah repents and tells the Lord that he'd done evil and admits that, in one case here, let's look at that. Look at Genesis 38, verse 15 and 16. Two things, envy and lust. Those are two things you're going to have to deal with any kid. And just recognizing and not allowing anything to fuel those things. When you're an adult, you can measure things. I mean, you tell yourself, but a child has no governor on that thing at all. A man can see nudity and be repulsed by it. A child is fascinated by it. And what you think is, that's not real, or that's just animated, but you don't know what kind of impact. I've seen kids grow up thinking they're the superhero to the point where it's ridiculous. And they don't discern the reality from the myth that's going on, that you're allowed. That's why you have to, as an adult, it's your responsibility to measure what they get, how they get it, who's around them. Okay? And I don't believe in being so strict that they never have fun. That's ridiculous. It's just, it might require you to take a little of your time and show them some fun. I know, man. I was as bad as anyone for not playing with my kids growing up. What the sad thing is? That you're trying to make a living. I hardly ever worked under 50 hours a week. Ever. And working 50 hours a week and coming home, well, you know what you're worth when you come home. Not much. Okay? And you say hi to the kids, give them a kiss, but then they want to play, and then once you get out on the floor and crawl around, you don't feel like it. You really don't. And then when you're old enough to do it, guess what? They're not in the house anymore. Or you're too old to get out on the floor and crawl around. And I know it's a vicious cycle, is what it is. But just remember, okay? And the other thing is this, don't think that you have to buy your kid everything to have a good time. I've seen them have more fun in a cardboard box that the gift came in than the gift. Just remember that. They can get by with much less, much simpler things and have a great time, especially if you help them. I mean, if you take that cardboard box and cut out some windows, or make a doorway, or even color it somehow and paint it for them, wow, man. That to them is, that's the cat's meow. So, don't fall into what the world thinks you need to do with your kids. They know nothing about how to raise children. But just remember, when you start spotting some bad things, I wasn't raised in a Christian home, and even though I was taught some morality, some of the things that I could get into should never be allowed in a Christian home, ever. Should not be there. Genesis 38, verse 15 and 16. It says, when Judah saw her, now who he sees is, he thinks he sees a harlot, okay? Actually, it's his daughter-in-law. And what's happened is, one of his sons married this woman, he dies. And Judah promises her the next kid that comes of age, he promised her, but ends up giving her to somebody else. Okay? And this woman is about to, she's about to leave the prime of her life. Should I say that? You know what's going on. She's about to leave the childbearing years of her life. Excuse me. Y'all don't watch the news. Good. She's about to leave the childbearing years of her life. So what she does is she disguises herself as a harlot. And Judah buys her. And it says, and when Judah saw her, he thought her to be a harlot because she had covered her face. And he turned in unto her by the way and said, Go to, I pray thee, let me come in unto thee. For he knew not that she was his daughter-in-law. And she said, What wilt thou give me? Or what mayest thou come in unto me? In other words, what she does is, he doesn't have anything really to pay. He's given her bracelets, but they're all his personal items. And of course, later on, she disappears because he brings whatever he said he's going to bring, and there's no harlot. They said, well, where's the harlot that was on this corner? He says, there ain't never been a harlot on that corner. He's like, well, next thing you know, she comes up pregnant, and they want to kill her because she's played the harlot in Israel. He says, well, the man that caused this pregnancy, here's his bracelet, and man, they're throwing those things out, and there's Judah's. Judah realized what he had promised her and didn't deliver. He said, a harlot is more righteous than me. That's how that ended. Point being is, you got problems with Judah with lust. You got problems with Simon and Levi, just absolute hatred, man. You got problems with envy when they sold Joseph. These are all things that parents gloss over. They gloss over them. They think, oh, they'll grow out of it. They won't grow out of it. They'll grow into it. That's the problem. So you got to be careful of that. And let me say this. It doesn't matter that you yourself have failed in such matters in the past. If you can recognize it in yourself, you can recognize it in your kids. Okay? I know we're all blind to ourselves in a certain extent. At least that's what I've been told about me. You're blind, you can't see, And maybe that's true. Maybe that's true about all of us. But I do see my failings, at least to some extent. Maybe not to the extent you see them, but I see some of it. And I would think that I could at least see that in my children. Okay? You're raising your children not to repeat your pattern. The pattern passed down to you, which passed down from you, from somebody else. You're trying not to repeat that pattern. You're trying to correct, train, and discipline out the very things that have caused you a lot of grief in your life. And it doesn't matter whether it's arrogancy or whatever, but it's acknowledging that and trying to. The example would have been Lot's two daughters, man. I mean, they wanted what they wanted. And you know what? They didn't care how they was going to get it. It wasn't so much lust. They didn't lust after their father. They wanted a child. They wanted a progeny. Is that right? The right word? They wanted a family. And they would do anything to get it. Evidently weren't taught too well. So, all right, turn to Luke chapter 8, verse 20. Before I go there, let me see what I've got here. I've got something. I'll be sitting there in the morning, and all of a sudden more verses come to me. Oh, okay. All right, turn to Mark chapter 9 first. We'll cover these two things first. Here's an example of, covetousness. If not, it could be more envy, but it definitely would be covetousness. Mark chapter 9, verse 33. And then we'll go to Luke chapter 9. It says, it came to Capernaum, and being in the house, he asked them, what was it that ye disputed among yourselves by the way? They're arguing. The disciples were arguing one another. But they held their peace, for by the way they had disputed among themselves who should be the greatest. I mean, not only did that come down to the whole group, but remember it came down to a couple boys thinking they were going to be the greatest. Isn't that something? That's not something you should even worry about right now. what you should think about, who can be the humblest? Who can be the humblest right now? Who can realize the station that we have is not reigning over someone, but submitting to someone? That's what it is. Look at Luke chapter 9 in verse 45. Let's see. 45 to 48. And if this doesn't apply to the family, it does apply to brethren. Verse 44. Let these sayings sink down into your ears, for the Son of Man shall be delivered into the hands of men. But they understood not his saying, and it was hid from them, that they perceived it not, and they feared to ask him of that saying. So they're afraid to ask, hey, I don't understand a word you just said. Then there arose a reasoning among them. See, since we can't figure out what he said, let's think about what we want. That's kind of how this went. Which of them should be greatest? And Jesus, perceiving the thought of their heart, took a child and set him by him, and said unto them, whosoever shall receive this child of my name receiveth me, and whosoever shall receive me receiveth him that sent me. For he that is least among you all, the same shall be great. And a child is usually not, it's in the purest form of those things. It's usually not in their heart. All those things have to be, all those evil things, they're present there as far as the sin nature, but they're not cultivated. It takes time to cultivate how wicked you are today. It takes time. But it happens. And the same with the good qualities. It takes time to cultivate. Teaching a child to be honest. You'll have to teach your kid not to steal. You absolutely will. You'll have to teach your child how not to lie. So, my kid would never steal anything. Oh, you don't know that. Give them the opportunity. Now, if you've already told them they go in the grocery store and they pick up the pack of gum and you put that back, that's not yours. We haven't paid for it. We're not going to pay for it. You can't have that. Yeah, they do that. But it's going to take you several times, maybe a lot of times. You may have a stubborn kid. You may have to just, plan on every time you go out, you may have to put things in his way to tempt him. So, don't do that. No, I'm just saying you may have to give him the opportunity so that you can correct it. Because the devil sure will give him the opportunity. All right. Turn to, what I tell you, John chapter 1. John chapter 1. This is going to be an example of some good brothers. Some brothers who love one another. John chapter 1, verse 40 to 42, it says, one of the two which heard John speak and followed him was Andrew, Simon Peter's brother. He first, notice this is what he did first, findeth his own brother Simon and saith unto him, we have found the Messiah. Okay? I'll tell you what, if you lived in my household, I would have probably been the last, or my brother. The only reason my brother got the gospel from me is because he was dying. That's the only reason he got it. Because we weren't close and we didn't talk, and I certainly didn't feel like I should try to explain it to him because he probably wouldn't hear it anyway. He got to hear it. Don't know if he accepted it, but he got to hear it. But had not the Lord put an extreme case on me, he probably never would have. And I would have probably never heard it from him. That's terrible. Shouldn't be that way. He says, we have found the Messiah, which is being interpreted the Christ. And he brought him to Jesus. You see that? Man, that's a good brother. That's a good brother. Brings his brother to Christ. Goes and gets him, says, I found him. You follow me. Come with me. I'll prove it. I'll show you. Whew. And he brought him to Jesus, and when Jesus beheld him, he said, thou art Simon, the son of Jonah, thou shalt be called Cephas, which is by interpretation a stone. That's a good brother. Now look at something else. Look at Mark 1:16. Mark chapter 1, verse 16. When two brothers are close, and they're not raised with animosity toward one another or envy of one another. I'm not saying they don't wrestle and they don't get in their little fights and everything, but they don't grow up hating one another. They grow up loving one another. And even though that might be little brother, you know, the oldest one is looking out. You can always tell. You know, even my brother, I could tell. One time I had a bully in the neighborhood, literally on top of me trying to light my hair on fire. And I screamed for my brother, and he showed up and knocked him right off of me. And I think he was a little scared of this kid. But he did it anyway. I'll never forget it. But a brother, he cares enough about you that he's going to look out for you. He's going to do something for you. Notice this, it says, now as he walked by the Sea of Galilee, he saw Simon and Andrew, his brother, casting a net into the sea, for they were fishers. Isn't that something? These two could actually work together, have a business together. I mean, who better to trust than your own brother? I'm not saying it always works out, but it can. It was for them. I mean, Jesus chose both these boys that were physical brothers to be fishers of men. He saw something in them. And that's something to see. That's something. Train your children, teach your children, discipline your children, love one another. You say you can't. Yeah, you can. You can teach them respect. They'll learn to grow to love each other if they start treating each other right. And that's where you step in and make sure that happens. Don't pit them one against the other. Don't do that. You know what you find out about children, and probably even with twins, that they are so different. One may excel in one thing, one excel in another. I mean, by all accounts, I'm the dummy in the family. I mean, by all accounts. My brother was reading Shakespeare, read through the works of Shakespeare when he was a teenager. My brother actually got an original $2 bill. I still have it for reading like 83 books in the 5th grade. He got this $2 bill from the teacher, the old $2 bill. Okay? My sister could read constantly and absorb everything. I finally adopted it because Mom kept dragging us to the library, and so I started getting these simple books, and then I started liking books about dogs, with Savage Sam, Old Yeller. I love that stuff. So I started reading. That's the only reason I picked up reading. But my rest of my family were avid readers. My dad was, my mom was. I'm the dummy. But you know what? At least that was something she trained. That was something she taught, and it stuck with us. Listen, I can read today because of my mother, not because of school. Okay, let's look at, well, maybe we won't look at that. Huh? Take a peek at it? All right, we'll start it. All right, turn to Luke chapter 8, verse 20. This is Jesus and his siblings. Luke chapter 8, verse 20. You don't have a lot about, Catholics don't even believe he had any brothers and sisters, but the Bible tells you he had at least 6 half brothers and sisters. Okay? That means they had the same mother, different father. Okay? Luke 8:20 says, and it was told him by certain which said, thy mother and thy brethren stand without, desiring to see thee. That verse speaks volumes to me. That's usually where family is, standing without. While the meeting's going on, while the fellowship with God is going on inside the house, they're outside. Family's always the last ones, it seems, to try to get in, or the hardest ones to get in. And Mary, okay, even though, man, Mary's got to have some idea what's going on here. I don't know if she just kind of refuses to believe it or it's just too amazing for her to believe. But they're all standing without, man, while the revival's going. I mean, he's raising people off that are sick and dying. He's raising them up. He's healing them. And they're without. Look at Mark 6:3. We'll stop with that. But Mark chapter 6, verse 3. Until his resurrection, you really don't see anything change. Okay? But in Mark 6:3, it says, "Is not this the carpenter, the son of Mary, the brother of," and now it's going to name his brothers, James, Joseph, Judah, and Simon. And are not his sisters, plural. Now just taking a guess, just a guess, I'm going to bet that there's 4 brothers and 2 sisters. Why? He is one of 7. And 1, well, that's a number for God, and 7's a number of completeness, and 1 and 7 is 8. And the Bible says, "I'll do a new thing in the earth. Behold, a woman shall compass a man." And Mary is that woman where God did a new thing. She begat a man without another man. So just a little numerology there. Didn't mean to throw you too many curves. So James, Joseph, Judah, Simon, and his sisters. I got to go through the rest of this or you won't get it. Okay. Let me read you 1 Corinthians chapter 15. It says that he was buried and that he rose again the 3rd day according to the Scriptures, that he was seen of Cephas, then of the 12. That's Peter. After that, he was seen of above 500 brethren at once. Okay? Of whom the greater part remain in this present, but some are fallen asleep. After that, after he was seen of the 500, he was seen of James. Well, James has already seen him because he's part of the 12. So who's he talking about? He's talking about James, the Lord's brother, which the Bible tells you. Then of all the apostles. And last of all, he was seen of me, talk about Paul, as one born out of due time. Okay, how you know that? Look at Galatians 1:9. Turn to Galatians. Look at 1:19. I'm going to tell you that Jesus, as an older brother, didn't fail his family. I think they were all saved. And I'll give you the verse on it here in a second. Galatians 1:19 says, "But of the apostles saw I none save James, the Lord's brother." Now James is the first one on the list, so I'm thinking he's the second oldest. So when Jesus left for the ministry at 30 years of age, James took over the household. He would have been the second oldest. Okay? And he becomes an apostle. Not too shabby, man. And when James, notice in Galatians 2:9, turn there. Galatians 2:9 says, "And when James, Cephas, and John, who seemed to be pillars, perceived the grace that was given unto me, they gave to me and Barnabas the right hands of fellowship, that we should go into the heathen, and they into the circumcision." You see that James there? It looks like Peter, James, and John, because Cephas is the name for Peter. All right? Peter, James, and John. It's not the James you're thinking of. I got that wrong early on. James, the brother of John, has already been killed. He's killed in Acts chapter 12. He's talking about James, who is the bishop at Jerusalem. And it's the Lord's brother. That's the James he's referring to there. Now, think about this a second. You're the second oldest son. You get a special visit from the resurrected older brother. You think that didn't impact James to where he went home and said, "Mom, I got something to tell you." She goes, "I suspected it all along. Look what happened to me." Because look at this verse here. Look at Acts chapter 1, verse 13 and 14. We say that, the Bible doesn't ever tell us about his family. It does. You just have to read very closely. In verse 13 and 14, "And when they were come in, they went into the upper room, and there abode both Peter and James and John and now that's the James that's the brother of John, because it says James and John and Andrew, Philip and Thomas, Bartholomew and Matthew, and then we got James the son of Alphaeus and Simon Zelotes and Judas the brother of James." Okay? You got James in that thing 3 times in that verse. Notice this. These all continue with one accord in prayer and supplication with the women. Who's the women? Mary Magdalene, Mary and Martha. Who knows who all the women were? I can't even think of the some that I should know. But the women were there. And this it says, and Mary, the mother of Jesus. Okay? His mother is a part of the group. Nobody ever prays to her. Nobody asks her anything because she's not like the Roman Catholics. She's not a mediatrix. She is Mary, the mother of Jesus, the man. Okay? Mary, the mother of Jesus, and with his brethren. Well, he's not talking about the women, and he's not talking about the disciples, and he's not talking about his mother. Who's he talking about? He's talking about his brothers. They're there. Because you know what James did? After he sees the Lord, he goes home and tells them, oh man, he is what we've always suspected. There was something different about him. He is what he is. He's the Son of God. I saw him raised from the dead, talk to him, holes in his hands, his feet, there he was. And I'm just saying, as an older brother, he didn't fail his family. He didn't fail. They had a stigma that the Pharisees placed on them because they said, we be not born of fornication, replying to Mary. They had to live with that. And then all of a sudden, Joseph disappears. We're not even told that he dies, but we suspect that he has. That means that Jesus is running the household. We don't know for how long. And then after Jesus steps out into the ministry, do what God calls him to do, that's when James would step in. And that's the one he went to visit. Last of all, he was seen of James. He didn't just let his family perish. Don't let yours. Okay, we'll stop there. Yeah, we still got more to go. One more week at least. If I find more. Any questions about what we covered? Thank you. All right.